Hello, I'm Ruth Williams, the Marine Conservation Manager for Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and thank you for inviting me here today to speak to Coastal Futures 2022 on the need for regional indicators and annual reporting to drive local marine nature recovery. We've just heard, well, hopefully we've just heard, if the programme hasn't changed since I recorded this, from Chris Tuckett from MCS about the NGO views on the marine strategy. The Wildlife Trust share these frustrations that the current programme of measures are once again woefully insufficient to achieve good environmental status in the UK's seas. Our response to the consultation for the Marine Strategy Part 3 was that the existing and updated programme of measures are just simply not fit for purpose, and they fail to consider previous consultation responses. So with that said, I've been asked to focus my talk today on indicators, and in particular the need for regional indicators and regular annual reporting to enable us to monitor change, and crucially for future years to measure marine nature recovery success. So today I want to talk about some of the work we've piloted in Cornwall as part of our local nature recovery strategy pilot, and in particular looking at some of the marine nature recovery principles that we've also thought about in detail and included in a report that was also published last year. And this includes our thoughts on designing measurements or indicators of marine recovery success. I also want to explain a little bit about the key elements of the Southwest Marine Ecosystem Model, which is a regional system that's really aimed at facilitating local recording of events and trends to promote collective knowledge, and whether this model of local reporting and assessment of indicators could be replicated in other regions to help determine the state of our regional seas and to give us a time and cost-effective indication of change. So what's the need? We all know that ocean recovery is about giving nature the space and time to thrive and recover, to rebuild those marine systems that deliver the many benefits to society that we receive from a healthy ocean. And it's not just about protecting the status quo in its current degraded state. We really need to be proactive in encouraging recovery to allow that environmental growth, which has got benefits not just for our wildlife, but for our sustainable futures, for our businesses, our industries, and us as human beings. So many indicators are used to assess current measures, but they're reported on a 5-year cycle, or often very longer in some cases. And this may be just about acceptable for things like the 25-year plan, but these measures have to be specific, they have to be time relevant, and they have to be assessed properly. And as we've heard already, that currently isn't happening in the case of the marine strategy. I'm not saying there isn't a need for high-level strategic targets and indicators, but these often don't reflect local or in particular rapid changes. And they're often at a scale that means that they're not of that much use to help assess the state of regional seas. In Cornwall in 2020, we were chosen as one of the 5 pilot areas nationally to produce a draft local nature recovery strategy, an LNRS. It was led by the Cornwall Council and it set out priorities and opportunities for nature recovery in our beautiful county down here. Local nature recovery strategies are defined within the Environment Act as being terrestrial only. The seas below mean water springs fall outside of their statutory scope. But the sea in Cornwall is the core of our identity. It's foundational to our fishing industries and our communities. Our marine waters and our seabed are an ecological hotspot, and we've got a tourist-based economy that's reliant on the beauty and quality of our coast and seas. So for these reasons, we were really pleased that the Council included a marine element into our local nature recovery strategy, which was submitted to DEFRA in June 2021. The draft strategy sets specific priorities for the recovery of nature over the next 5 years, and it's an ambitious strategy aiming for what we now see as reasonably standard within our circles of 30% of land and sea to be well managed by 2030. But this requires really strong leadership and evidence-based decision making, and to do that we need current, accurate data to provide that evidence. And ultimately, how do we measure the success of whether we have achieved that target or not? Cornwall has also produced a State of Nature report again last year, and this is a start in terms of where we currently are. But even at a county scale, this is a huge piece of work to do on a regular basis to inform where we are against our targets. And realistically, it's not something we can repeat year on year as a measure of progress. Consequently, one of the enablers highlighted in the strategy as being necessary to ensure success in delivery of its aims was the need to strengthen systematic, integrated, robust and responsive local data and monitoring. This should be open and accessible, and a really positive note from my perspective anyway, is that there is a recognition of the value of citizen scientists to collect that data and actively contribute to that process. So through the foresight of Cornwall Council, the Cornish Local Nature Recovery Strategy has tested an approach to integrating a marine element into their draft strategy as part of this pilot process. And there were no great barriers or problems, and there was actually great enthusiasm from most stakeholders. But the marine element is still a little bit of an add-on, with no legal duty or statutory remit to prioritise marine nature recovery opportunities within that strategy. So to address some of the gaps and to progress thinking on marine nature recovery, Natural England funded a piece of work which ran in parallel to the local nature recovery strategy and was completed by a small team, including myself from Cornwall Wildlife Trust, Kate Sugar from Natural England, and Jenny Christie and Philip Hoskin from Cornwall Council. But it also brought together a lot of expertise and contributions from a number of other key organisations, particularly via the Marine Working Group and the Cornwall Marine Liaison Group members. And this project looked at defining local marine nature recovery and how existing information can best be used to prioritise opportunities for that recovery, both within existing MPA networks and in the wider seas, and hopefully developing transferable methodologies to inform the marine nature recovery component of any future local nature recovery strategy. If I'm honest, it was fairly rapid, a first steps approach, and it could be progressed, and hopefully given the necessary resourcing, evidence, stakeholder engagement, which is crucial, and statutory support, it's hoped that this can be built on in the future. One of the key outputs of this piece of work was to look at what indicators could be used to measure marine recovery success. In recent years, various local, national and international reports have examined the state of our seas and attempted to track changes in the marine environment over time. Most of those, numerous and comprehensive as they are, most of those criteria have all been designed within the framework of traditional conservation, rather than to reflect the broader concept of marine nature recovery, which focuses on repair and restoration of the marine environment, which is slightly different criteria. They're also commonly designed and measured at a much bigger scale, whether that's international, national, and only very occasionally at a regional scale. And they're therefore of varying use when considering trends and impacts at that local level. So the task set us was to design a set of preliminary indicators and targets with which marine nature recovery success in Cornish inshore waters can be measured against. We took into account existing criteria and indicators from a range of sources, as well as things like the availability of data, complexity of analysis, and associated costs. Data for measurable indicators needs to be repeatable and ongoing, and where possible with data collected through existing funded programmes and reported on annually. I mean, we're looking at measuring success of recovery between now and 2030. So a 5-year reporting cycle just simply won't and can't work. We also considered the value of setting targets to measure recovery success. And while ambitious targets are incredibly useful to focus attention and activity, the reality of achieving nature recovery at sea can be difficult. It's different from on land. We don't own the seabed as we do nature reserves or farmland, where landowners can decide to manage it for recovery, and we can easily record that success against targets. Marine recovery relies on legislation, regulation, and industry action. Our recommended list therefore contains both the wider target, which you can't see on here, but the overarching target, if you like, of 30 by 30, as well as these proxy indicators of health and recovery, which assess the direction of travel, whether that's increasing or decreasing. So you can see that's highlighted by these arrows. And most of these data sets are locally or at least regionally collected. And we know that most of them are annually reported on, which is crucial for this timeframe that we're working towards. But what now? We know where this data is, but how do we collate it and report on it as a collective? One possibility is the Southwest Marine Ecosystems model. In the Southwest, we've already got that existing model for regular reporting on regional indicators. And it includes most of those that we've identified in that previous table through the marine nature recovery work. South West Marine Ecosystems brings together marine conservation, scientists, community and managers to share information and to network to improve the understanding of our seas and to develop future monitoring and management. In basic terms, it's to gain a collective awareness of what's happening in our seas each year. We run a conference series that's been running since 2007, and the archive, particularly from last year's webinar series, can be found on our YouTube channel, so have a look at those. And we also produce an annual report, usually following each conference, based on the last year's records and key events. And this is edited by volunteer experts, either as individuals or in teams, and is published by the MBA as well as being available online. The aim of the report is to record those observations and to capture change. And through this annual reporting, we can see really rapid changes like the recent explosion in tuna numbers that would be lost if we only report on a 5-year basis. But crucially, it's, sorry, I think I've just clicked on the web link. Oh, no, there we go. Crucially, it's the people that make South West Marine Ecosystems work. Volunteers and citizen scientists are a huge part of it, and they get credit for what they do and for contributing their records. And they see their data given real value on a regional stage. We've also got a huge number of professionals from a wide number of organisations, more than 70 at the moment, from all sorts of places, charitable organisations, statutory and management. And this delegate list, attendee list is growing. Since we went online last year, this has grown to more than 1,200 people, so it's quite a reach. Sadly, local partnerships and networks aren't really currently accepted as valued sources of data, and this needs to be remedied. There are some really serious local experts who, together with highly trained and passionate citizen scientists, need to be valued as a cost-effective way of both recording, but also contextualising records. The reports that we produce are standalone annual reports, but they also show changes in relation to previous years, trends that can be analysed. And crucially, they also highlight gaps and trigger questions to focus future research, as well as highlight issues and trends that can help inform management needs. And they provide a contextual background, which I've already said, which is important. And we try to balance the descriptive narrative with that data analysis, which is much needed and recognised. An example of the things that we see and how it's put into context. Over recent years, we've seen a real increase in Octopus vulgaris. But putting that into historical context, we know that this isn't due to climate change. It's happened before in the middle of last century and will no doubt happen again. But some novel sightings, like the first few tuna that we saw off the Cornish coasts 4 or 5 years ago, has gone on to regular sightings and a rapid increase in their numbers, leading to the need for rapid changes in management. And if this was part of a 5-year reporting cycle, the management systems would have missed it. So South West Marine Ecosystems fills that gap in terms of local reporting, and it can enable management to happen and change more quickly. So can this model be used for assessing local indicators? The simple answer is we think so. It's a start. We need to better use what data is collected and to utilise already funded local monitoring schemes. South West Marine Ecosystem reports on indicators collected from existing programmes on an annual basis to assess that change. But this is contextualised by the role of experts in that process. It also assesses the direction of travel. And that's, like I said previously, a crucial element that we determined from our marine nature recovery work. Local indicators also act as early warning systems, and they act as our eyes and ears on the ground. They're highly sustainable, and they're models which, like the South West Marine Ecosystems, which can help to build social capital, links between science and citizen scientists, and it increases that outreach by engaging people. By encouraging people to send in their reports, they're more likely to be aware of the wider issues and then take action where needed. And finally, these sorts of local indicator schemes are highly cost effective. I think we're almost there in terms of how we use local and regional data as indicators of change, but there is still development needed and gaps to be filled. The strength of local marine indicators is in the people involved, but that must be handled quite carefully and diplomatically to understand the dynamics of those different people and the different networks. And also the Southwest Marine Ecosystems conferences and reports work on a set structure in terms of the chapters that I mentioned or shown on one of the previous slides. And that's fine for collecting and collating data, but we need to work at an ecosystem level, and the functional linkages are often forgotten about or left out when we report and monitor in those traditional silos or themes. And that's one area that we hope to address and is a bit of a work in development. What we mustn't do is get hung up about indicators and redesigning things each time there is a new strategy or new target. We simply don't have time. We need marine nature recovery now. So let's use what's already being collected locally through existing programs that's already being analysed annually with existing resource so it can be sustainable, and ensure we can monitor these trends so that we can effectively measure recovery at this important regional scale and feed into local decision making. So thank you. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Kate, Pip and Jenny for their work with me on the Marine Nature Recovery Strategy, and Bob Earl and other members of the Steering Group Committee for their voluntary support in coordinating the Southwest Marine Ecosystems. Thank you.